My name is Joe Sharkey. I am visiting from New York City. I live in Brooklyn. And what's that?
It just beeped.
Yeah, that's recording. Uh, right?
It is?
Okay. So, yeah, I'm here in south of Asheville, North Carolina, near South Carolina. This is the farthest south I've been on the East Coast. And I heard about this direct action workshop and just riding around Asheville for the first time on my bicycle.
Explain what you were doing on your bicycle.
Oh, well, I rode down from New York with a young friend of mine who's starting school in Asheville. So we made a bike trip out of it, and that was quite the journey. It's been a very enjoyable month of riding and camping. I highly recommend bike touring to everyone as a way to become really present in your moment, in your world. But I am from New York, and I volunteer with in Time's Up. It's an environmental direct action group. So when I saw this flyer outside the food co-op in Asheville, I knew it was a good use of my free time down here, and it's been a wonderful weekend. I, in New York, have, for the past 3 years, been deeply involved, over-involved perhaps, in trying to maintain the spirit, if not the manifestation, of the critical mass movement as it applies to bicycles.
What is the critical mass movement?
Critical mass is a occurrence that first happened, generally it's agreed it first happened in San Francisco in 1992, and it's a very simple concept in the sense that a group of cyclists or people who use non-polluting transportation, such as rollerblades or skateboards or whatnot, gather at a certain place, a certain time, usually within the urban context, and they gather and they form a critical mass of human-powered transportation, and they take to the streets, which are typically dominated by motor vehicles. And this has a wide variety of results. You know, it's a very simple formula, but from that simple formula you get all sorts of great things like community interaction and certainly an empowerment of people to learn how to ride their bikes and feel more confident on the road and see a city as you've never seen it before. So it's a worldwide movement. It's spread to hundreds and hundreds of cities, and specifically in New York City's critical mass got very large. It started shortly after San Francisco sort of got the ball rolling, and it grew very fast. It was very successful, and back in 2004 during the Republican National Convention, the state, the police, the NYPD, who had previously taken more of a permissive stance towards this action, which is non-hierarchical. There's not really a set structure other than that which is created by the enthusiastic participants. And so in 2004, and I've met a number of people here at the Action Camp who were in New York City. I wasn't there myself. I was living in California, where I'm originally from. But the police came down very hard on critical mass, as it provided a clear target of and a somewhat predictable target for them to exert their force against people who had gathered in New York City to protest the whatever it was, coronation.
Nuclear non-proliferation treaty? No.
George Bush.
Oh, the inauguration.
His second term. And since then it's been a violent, somewhat violent and sad history, as this police have mobilized many resources over the last years to harass people who just want to get together and ride bikes. But it's a, potentially subversive act to be free and gather together and assert your rights or take rights that you might not legally have, but perhaps ought to have. And yeah, I came to New York 3 years ago and saw sort of a community around this particular movement that had suffered through a lot of harassment and trauma, violent, and through violence in the courts, and it's just sort of the day-to-day trauma of trying to ride a bike in New York City, which is very intimidating. It's so dense with its traffic, and the drivers are not always the most predictable. So I work with Time's Up. Time's Up is an environmental direct action group. I volunteer, I should say. It's all volunteer. And we do, similar things to Earth First, which is, here. I've been pleased to meet many Earth Firsters here. And we do the same thing with Time's Up, but it's within the city context. We defend our green spaces, our garden spaces. We try to take direct action to inform people of environmental issues, and doing group bike rides, including promoting critical mass, are some of the main tools, because getting on a bike and riding a bike is such a simple and sensible step that most individuals can take to both liberate themselves and be healthier people, both mentally and physically, and to live more frugally, and to enjoy more freedom. And New York City is a great place to ride. So Time's Up has done many, many years, 25 years of this work, and I'm privileged to be part of that in the last couple of years. And yeah, that's, I've done a lot of, I lead bike rides. I try to bring a lot of energy, and I haul. We have some sound trailers to bring the music to the streets and get the people of New York and people on bikes moving to the same rhythm, and it's so much fun. And of course, on the flip side, at critical mass in New York City these days, you have you used to have thousands of people show up, and now you have maybe dozens of people, and you have consistently a large following of the NYPD, numerous vehicles. It's a huge expenditure, which I'm not quite sure how the city can still afford it in these economic times. And it's, there's a great history of resistance to the oppression of the state, but like I said, it's gone on for many years. And I've sought creative ways to deal with this sort of situation where you have a much smaller group of committed people who know that you're going on a bike ride with police who are going to be unfriendly to you at best. And of course, people who don't know any better who show up. I think
So do people get arrested?
people don't get arrested anymore, generally speaking, unless you really act up. And you really have to act up. They just give out harassment tickets for non-existent laws, such as failure to stay in the bike lane, which is a frustrating one, because every bike lane in New York is usually has a car parked in it, and every cyclist has the right to use their discretion to be in whatever lane they need to be safe. So that's a tough one, because that's really miseducating people who are riding. That's miseducating the cops to use that as an excuse to harass people.
So are people fighting that?
Those get fought. It's tough, because I've come close to being arrested. I've gotten a few tickets, some more justly deserved, I suppose, than others. But the court system, for me, it's usually found guilty because I'm perhaps a little too, I don't know. But I think some judges throw these things out, and others are very much with the program which the NYPD has set up to harass cyclists. And it's so interesting because you have this real disconnect between what one city agency is doing versus the NYPD. The DOT has made dramatic, huge steps towards making the streets safer for everyone and bicycling more accessible for everyone in the past several years, while the NYPD seriously lags behind in enforcing laws on a day-to-day basis instead of over-enforcing laws on one night of the month.
So are you headed back up to New York on your bicycle?
It's been real nice, yeah. It's been really nice riding around here in the mountains, and New York City is a tough city for me sometimes because I really enjoy all this green and quiet and clean water and fresh air. But I'm going to head back there because in addition to the cycling, the great community, the really solid community that exists in sort of the radical cycling community, people who are doing workshops, free workshops to get more people on bikes, and taking direct action. Time's Up just earlier this month, because I was on the road, I missed it, but we had a really big action to raise awareness about the Indian Point nuclear power plant, which is just a couple dozen miles away from one of the biggest cities, and it's also a tough city to get out of if you're not on a bicycle. So, in the inevitable event that reactor and waste fail to be contained, there's going to be a lot of problems. So, but Time's Up continues to thrive in some ways.
Is there a website for Time's Up?
Yeah, just go to times-up.org, and we have a weekly radio program you can listen into. I'm often on that. And we do rides all the time. If you're ever in New York and you want to get plugged into sort of the radical scene, the activist scene, the bike scene, we try to really have some open doors and welcome people in, and certainly all volunteers are welcome. And yeah, we still ride and we still take action, but I myself, I put a lot of energy towards them, towards working with Time's Up. Creative energy, it's just so much fun, but I think there's other issues in the larger community in New York that
So are you going to take anything back with you?
Oh, sure. This has been great. I never had so much direct action training, and it's been great to meet other people and hear other stories of the past and the present, and sort of draw the parallels. It's so dramatically different in terms of New York City, which is these days is a police state where you can't have a protest outside of a free speech pen. And sounds like, that's a trend that is unfortunately expanding. But it's great to be out here where there's more freedom to have these ideas about how we can do things differently and how we can affect immediate change. So,
Well, it's been great having you here.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.